Ok, bueno, vamos al siguiente video parte número 10. En este, por lo que estaba viendo, vamos a ver lo que son diálogos y señas, perdón, diálogos y letreros. Entonces vamos a empezar, ya que este video es largo, de 21 minutos, en promedio.
Okay, so welcome back. Today, in our recurring segment where I try to decide if I like tiled or unit.
Okay. Una cosa más, me hemos quedado en esto. En el último video hicimos justamente esto. Hit on like. 4 segundos. ¿Te parece? Y veo. Bonito, bonito. Vamos a ver.
Unity's tile map system better. So, and this is what the Unity's tile map system looks like. And you can notice there's some tearing here. And in order to fix the tearing, see, it's really bad there. In order to fix the tearing, I went to using tiled, but tiled also has some tearing sometimes too. So, shout out to Vilius in the Discord. He suggested something that's actually going to take care of this right now. Hopefully for good. So if you go to your grid object that gets created when you make a tile map system and change your cell gap to a very, very small negative number. So say negative 0.0001. And I'll do the same thing for the x and the y axis, negative 0.0001. Just making that small negative gap, and the negative gap means that they're overlapping just a tiny bit, and they're not really overlapping because this number is so small. If I hit play now, you'll see that all that tearing is gone, which is amazing. So, again, shout out to Vilius in the Discord, who went over or explained how to do that to everybody, and yeah.
Oh, no me he percatado de eso. Oh, pero no lo miro yo. ¿Será una configuración que ahora está mejor tile? Puede ser porque no se mira, ¿verdad? Bueno. Sigamos.
I actually like this better than the tiled system now, so that's awesome. Alright, so today we're going to learn how to make some interactable objects. So what I want to do is I want just like a little sign up here, right there, that when I get within a certain range of it, I can press the space key, and then I can have a little dialog message pop up, maybe telling me that there's a pond up there. So that's what we're going to get started with. First things first, we're going to go to the art folder, and in the art folder there's an objects file that's associated with this. Now we want to get to some of these objects here, like for example, actually, is it the objects file that has the sign? I forget if it's objects. Oh, nope, it's not objects. All right, cool. So we already have our overworld then. Our overworld here has a sign built into it. You can see that sign over here. I'm going to be using this one that has grass on it, since I'm putting it in a grass little roady place. And yeah, that's what I'm going to use. So I need to find where that is in my overworld. Now I could go through each of these, but there's literally hundreds of them. So instead, I'm going to open up my sprite editor, find the sign I want, just zoom in on it, and I'm just going to click it, and it's overworld 111. That's the sprite I want. So I'm going to zoom down here and find overworld 111. And I'm just going to pull it into the world. Now by default, it gets put on the default sorting layer, which means that I can't see it because...
Ok, esto se puede cambiar un poquito porque yo no lo hice con este... Tengo el overworld, pero hay que separarlo, ¿eh? Sería ver el video cómo separar este. sería hacerlo similar a como se hizo este. Sprite mode. Bueno, vamos a ver si te ves aquí el video. Si alcanza a ver un poquito. Aquí está. Multiple pixels por unit 16. Mesh type, tight, advanced. Ok, tiene aquí non-power of 2. Clamp, point no filter. Slice. Y la 16 por 32 por 16. No. 16 por 22. Algo así. Oh. Ahí está. Sí. Ok. Decimos a la pura lija, como dicen. Ok. Vamos así. Wow, yo creo que esto se quedó trabajo. Ok. Veremos. Patience. Ok, sí, esto va para largo porque llevamos 2 minutos de video, ya van 8. Ok, al parecer se grabó como que bien heavy. Unity. Hola. Ya. Ok. Overworld. Cambiamos solamente aquí en rastro. Y después ahí. Se mira un poco feito el rótulo ahí, pero se mira.
I'm going to open up my sprite editor, find the sign I want, integer value for its coordinates. I'm going to put it at 12. Let's do -2. Actually, instead of 12, let's do 12.5. Okay. And yeah, that's not bad. All right, cool. Now, I'm going to rename this to sign so that it's something I can use again and again and again. And I'm going to add a couple extra things to this. The first thing I'm going to add is a box collider 2D. So box collider 2D. And I'm going to leave this one solid. This is going to be for the player to collide with it. The next thing I'm going to add is another box collider 2D. And this one, I'm going to make a trigger by ticking this little box here.
Okay, entonces agrego uno solamente para que chocara.
I'm also going to edit the size of this by clicking Edit Collider. And I'm going to grab these green handles, and I'm just going to go a ways out. This is going to represent the area in which the player needs to stand in order to trigger the the ability to have the little dialog box. So there we go. We got our two colliders. I'm going to add this to my prefabs because I have a feeling this is something I might want to use more of. So there we go. Ignore those two scripts. All right, cool. So now what I want to do is I want to add the actual dialog box onto my screen. So I'm going to go into my canvas here, and I'm going to create a new image. So UI image. I'm going to need to zoom way out in order to see it. And manipulate it. Alright, cool. So there's my UI image here. I'm going to move it down towards the corners of the screen, say about like that. If I flip over to the game view, I can use that to kind of let me know how big I want it to be. So let's go just up just a little bit more. Sorry for that weird cut. And now I'm going to center it on the screen. So once it's centered on the screen, I'm going to change the anchors. So right now it's anchored to the middle of the screen. I'm going to anchor it to the lower middle.
Pues acá en mi pantalla se va a quedar justamente ahí, de aquí para allá. Esa es la distancia que tienen ahí.
And I'm also going to replace this with an image that comes with that package I gave you guys. This one is from the objects. So if we go into objects here, you can see that it comes with some little dialog bubbles. I want to use this one. You can have it so that it can be contextual, like maybe you're using a thought bubble, maybe you're using a speech bubble, maybe it's like a, oh my gosh, what are you doing bubble? So I'm going to use this one. So to do that, I'm going to make sure that objects is highlighted in my art folder. I'm going to change it from single to multiple. Let's click apply. I also want to make sure that this is on point, no.
Ok, aquí estoy viendo por lo menos. Entonces aquí art, objects, aquí está. Entonces aquí multiple, camp, point no filter, apply. Y ahora supongo que es Sprite Editor.
Filter. Then I'm going to open up my sprite editor, choose slice, and I'm going to have it just slice this automatically. I don't need to do grid by cell size, and apply. And I've already
Slice, automatic, slice. Object 128. Ok, apply. Esto tengo un rato ahí. Object 128. Ok, vamos a ver qué hace con esto.
already done this because I worked ahead, sorry. So once I have it automatically slice, what yours is going to look like is this down here. So if you click on this,
Ooh. No, pero está ahí.
sprite here, that was automatically sliced up. I want to be able to stretch this without distorting the way it looks. I want the corner to look like this, and then I want this part right here to tile across so that so it looks like it's supposed to, so I'm not distorting the pixely look. So that's what these green tabs here are for. These are for doing something called 9 slicing. So I'm going to grab the one on the left, I'm going to pull it all the way over until it's right there, right where the top part begins. I'm going to do the same thing with the one on the right. Pull it over until it's right there. Now for the top one, I'm going to pull it down, and I'm going to go until it's after that little shadow.
Oh. Sprite.
Same thing with the one on the bottom, after the shadow. Now what'll happen is if I stretch this image, it will keep the corners looking like this, but then it will tile all of these center bits. So here, here, top and bottom, and then the center, it'll tile that, but it'll keep the corner looking exactly like this. It won't stretch the pixels at all. So I'm going to click apply. To apply that to that image, and now I can exit my sprite editor. Now, oh yeah, one more thing I wanted to find out is what was the number of that sprite. So this is objects 128, so that's the one I want to use. So I'm going to go to my image, make sure this is highlighted. I'm going to find objects 128, and I'm going to pull that onto where it says none sprite. Okay, that's mostly what I want. So what happened that I didn't want? Let's see. I probably pulled the bottom part up. Let's go back to my sprite editor. It's exactly what I did. All right, so if I look at this, I want...
Decía yo, pucha, ¿por qué estar haciendo eso? Pero bueno, pero guardar la lógica. Listo. Ahí. Entonces, apply, scene, object,
the blue, apply again, get out of here, and there we go. See, we got that nice pixelated corner, and then the top is just flat. If you don't do the 9 slice, then you'll end up with this corner trying to stretch so that everything remains in proportion with each other. But we don't want that. We want the top to be kind of like that. All right, cool. I'm going to change this from image to dialog box. And I'm going to make as a child of the dialog box some text. And the text gets created. I'm going to make it so it fits inside.
Ya sé qué pasó. Este maestro tiene el juego diferente. Tienen...
my dialog box pretty nicely. I'm going to leave it anchored in the center, but I want to make sure it's directly in the center. I'm going to make my font size, say 30, and I'm going to make the color straight black. By default, Unity does text. This is kind of gray. It doesn't look very sharp. Now I could use that pixel font again, but it's a little too hard to read for me to want to use it for dialogue. So there's my text. And I'm going to change this from saying new text to just saying dialogue. We're going to change that in script in just a second. So, cool, there we go. Now, I don't want this up all the time, so I'm just going to deactivate that for now. Now, time to do some scripting. So we're going to go to our scripts, and I'm going to create a new C# script. I'm going to call this, how about sign? Let's do capital S sign. Cool. And now I'm going to open this up in Visual Studio. So the first thing that happens, just for the logic of this, so in Unity, if we're looking at our scene, and we want to talk about what's going to happen here. So we've got our player. When our player is inside this area, if they press a button, I'm going to use the space bar. We want the dialog box to pop up, and we want the dialog to say what we want it to say. If our player leaves the area...
Mande. Okay. Bye, Mom.
Or if they press the space bar again, we want the dialog box to go away. So that's the logic we're going to have. So we're going to have to be able to access the UI, which means that we need to have the using Unity engine.ui tag. We need to have a reference to the dialog box. We need to have a reference to the text, and we need to also have a string of what we want the text to change to. So those are 4 things that we know for sure we need to do in our script.
Okay.
Right away. So let's dive in. So again, first thing, we need to add a using tag for the UI. So using unityengine.ui. Next, we need to reference the dialog box itself. I'm going to do that as a public game object. I'm going to call it dialog box. We need to reference the text. So I'm going to do public text. We'll call this dialog text. We need to reference the string that we want to show up in place of the dialog. So this is going to be a public string.
Ok, está fallando bastante el internet de mi casa. Voy a compartir de mi internet.
I'm just going to call that dialog. And we need to have a bool to say whether or not that dialog box should be active. So I'm going to do public bool, and we'll call this, I don't know, dialog active. All right, cool. So we don't need to do anything in the start method, and in the update method, we'll come back to that in just a second. So what I want to do is I want to add a built-in Unity method, which is called onTriggerEnter2D. So we're going to do void onTriggerEnter. Don't actually want that one. We want the 2D version. So let me just undo that really quick. So void onTriggerEnter. Ah, good Lord, I did it again. Good Lord. Void trigger enter 2D. There we go. And I like to call it, and don't like to call it collision. I like to call it other. I don't know why. It's just what I do. What we want to do is we want to check to see if the other is the player. So if other dot compare tag, and the tag we're comparing is player, then we want to, I'm just going to do a quick little debug statement. So debug.log player in range. Then I'm going to do another quick little method here for onTrigger exit. So private void onTrigger exit 2D. And again, I'm going to change it from collision to other because I'm a weirdo. So collider other. And we're going to say if other dot compare tag player. So if it's the player, then we want to do debug.log player left range. All right, cool. So I'm going to
if other compare tag to the player log whether
I'm going to save this really fast. We're going to go into Unity here. I'm going to grab my sign, and I'm going to add the sign script to it. And now, as soon as it's...
Hold on, new game, script. Amazing. Warning. Is obsolete use.
done thinking, it should let me add the sign script. Maybe? There we go. Cool. Now it needs to know what the dialog box is.
Ahí está. Dialog box image sería todo este. Y el text sería este. El dialog que quería mostrar sería
So that's the dialog box. Needs to know what the text is. So that's the text. Needs to know what the dialogue is. And I'm going to call that pond ahead. Cool. All right, so now if I hit play, you should be able to interact with that sign in a little bit. So like if I go up here, not in range, so you'll notice I don't have any debug statements. So I'm in range, out of range, in range, out of range, in range, out of range. I think I have my statements collapsed. Yeah, there we go. So if I go back, in range, out of range, in range, out of range. Now that sign is right on top of my player, so let's actually fix that. I'm going to go to my sign here, my sprite renderer. Right now I have it on the player layer. I'm going to add a new sorting layer. I'm going to call this specifically signs. And then make sure that my sign is on that layer. And I also want, let's go back to my sorting layers. I want signs to be underneath player, like that. So now let's try it out. Let's make sure that our sign is beneath the player, otherwise it looks weird. So, player in range.
Se girar, porque se me da poco feito.
Left range, in range, left range. Cool. So now let's make it so that we can have that dialog pop up like it's supposed to. Let's actually change this bool from being dialog active to being player in range. I like that better. It's going to make our code just a little bit simpler. So if we're comparing tag, instead of doing this debug.log, so if the player enters, we're going to say that player in range is true. And if the player exits, we're going to say that player in range is false. Okay? In the update method, I'm going to be looking to see if we press the space key. So if input dot, let's do get key code dot space. This isn't the best way to do this because we're only doing it for space. It'd be better if we actually added something to the input map for like interact and then define that as space. Should we do that? We'll do that later. Okay. So input that get key code dot space. So if that's true and player in range, then I want to check to see if the dialog box is already active. If the dialog box is active, I'm going to deactivate it. If it is inactive, I'm going to activate it and change the text. So we're going to say if, what did I call it? Dialog box? Yeah. Dialog box dot active in hierarchy. So that's a true or false statement. If it is active in the hierarchy, then I'm going to. Hi.
Mr. Taft.
What do you need, Michael?
Did Steve leave a knee brace in here?
If he did, it'd be over there.
It'd be over here?
Yep.
Like in his back row?
Yeah, I mean, that's where he sits. I don't think he moved around anywhere.
I think he's SOL.
Where else would he have? Yeah, I can't, unless it's like in the teacher's lounge when you guys were doing your testing.
I'll go take care.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. So we're going to check to see if dialog box is active in hierarchy. So if it is active, we want to deactivate it. So we're going to do dialog box dot set active false. If it's not true that it's active, so else, we want to make it active. Dialog box dot set active true. And then after we set it active, we want to change the text. So dialog text dot text is equal to dialog. So there we go. I'm going to save this. I know this is turning out to be a slightly longer video than I usually like to make, but we're almost done. All right, so it's going to think for a second here. We're going to hit play.
Tim Taylor, would you please be able to meet a student outside room 2 to let him in?
Okay, so if I walk up here, I'm in range, and if I hit space, I got pawned ahead. That's weird. Did I do get key instead of get key down? I did do get key. So back in the script, let's change this from get key to get key down. Get key registers as long as it's held down. So like, even though I was just tapping it, it was probably down for more than one frame, which means that it registered more than once. Get key down only registers once the first frame you press it down. Oh, and there's one more thing I wanted to do in here too. If the player's leaving range, so player in range is false, the other thing I want to do as well is deactivate the dialog box. So dialog box set active false, so that it's not active if we're out of range. So I'm going to save my script. I'm going to pop back into Unity here. Let's hit play. Alright, it's going to think for a second. False, so that it's not active if we're out of range. So I'm going to save my script. I'm going to pop back into Unity here. Let's hit play. Alright, it's going to think for a second. Okay, so I'm going to go up. I'm in range. Pawned ahead, no pawned ahead. Pawned ahead, no pawned ahead. And if I have it active and I walk out of range, it goes away. So the next thing that we can do is you can make it so that your player is immobile until they close the dialog box if you want. If you want to make it very similar to Legend of Zelda, so that they're kind of stuck in almost like a cutscene. It's not really a cutscene, but kind of is, until the dialogue's exhausted. But I don't want to do that just yet, because we're going to talk about state machines and stuff when we do player attacking. So, yeah, there we go. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the description down below. A little longer today, like I said, but that's all right. You can follow me on Twitter to find out when I post new videos. You can join my Discord. I haven't been chatting every day because school started, but I'm going to try to, once things settle down, I think.
Bueno, eso fue todo por hoy.